Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here are your hosts, Brian E. Roach and Zach Metkler.
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. My name is Brian Roach, the host who doesn't like toast or any toasted bread products except for an English muffin, which is very nice. For this episode of the podcast, Joe has taken another well-deserved break and is relaxing in the sauna. And to help me get through the next how many ever minutes we ramble on, we welcome back to the podcast the professor of football himself, Zach Metkler. Zach, how you doing?
I'm just dandy in this fine, rainy Pittsburgh climate that we have that's so typical for this time of year.
Isn't it nice? Isn't it lovely? But you know what they say about the rain. You know, because it's April.
Bring May flowers.
Yeah, April showers. They bring May flowers. And what do May flowers bring? Pilgrims.
To each their own.
There you go.
Spring's my least favorite season, so I'm just kind of grinning and bearing it at this point. If that's what ends up happening, then so be it. But I could do without the flowers and the rain. And just...
Yeah, spring's not my thing. I'm a fall, winter guy.
Likewise.
You know,
I think it's the lineman. It's the lineman.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always shorts and shirt sleeve weather for linemen. Okay, so anyway, here's what we're going to try and focus on today. If you've been paying any attention to Twitter, draft Twitter, specifically if you've been paying any attention to what's been a topic of conversation in the Steelers draft universe, a lot of people are talking about the fact that because the Steelers have 10 picks in the draft, how can they possibly fit those 10 picks onto a team that is not dramatically devoid of talent, and really can they do that, and or should they be focused on using that capital that they have in this year's draft to try and do something crazy like move way up in the draft to get a Devin? So what we thought we would try and do is look at a couple scenarios of what might happen based on some mocks that have been out, based on just some general needs of teams, and try and get a sense of where do we think the Steelers would have to move to get a Devin. Specifically, you know, is it even feasible to move up enough to try and get Devon White? And if not him, then where do they got to be if they want to guarantee themselves Devin Bush? Knowing that it doesn't matter unless they're number one, they can't guarantee themselves of anything. So, and so that's the first part of this scenario, and then we probably will be posing a question of whether they should be doing this or not. So first is, what is it going to take? Because, you know, people think that they live in the world of draft day and that Kevin Colbert is actually Kevin Costner, and they can just make stuff up and go crazy. There are numerical values that have been placed on draft picks, and the teams adhere to this to a certain degree. I would say it's a certain degree of saying this is what we believe these picks are worth, and if you want ours, you have to give us more value than what it's worth, especially when you want to move heavily up. So let's first focus on where you think the Steelers need to be. First of all, what do you see happening with Devon White? Do you think how far down do you think he is potentially going to get picked?
See, that's the thing about this draft class is that there's really no, beyond Nick Bosa and Kyler Murray and Quinnen Williams, there's really no guarantees in this class, and even then we could always end up being surprised by them. I think you have a guy like Devon White. He could go as early as Oakland at 4, depending on what happens with Arizona's pick if they end up going Kyler Murray. Or he could go to Tampa Bay. I mean, he could go to the Giants because they need some help if they don't go after a guy like Dwayne Haskins. I mean, there's any really range that he can go in the top 10, but there's also a chance that, these teams end up looking elsewhere because all these teams in the top 10 could, not all of them, but a lot of them could use a middle linebacker help, especially one that could be a transcendent talent like Devon White is expected to be. But if you go and, you look at these teams and they end up, picking different guys, there's a chance that he starts falling a little bit. I don't envision him falling past Cincy. I think his floor would be Cincy, but I think his ceiling is Oakland, and I would be really surprised if he kind of goes outside the top 7 or 6 or so, which anything can happen. But I would say Cincy would be his absolute floor, but I'd be stunned if he made it out of the top 10 at this point.
Yeah, I kind of think, at least in my mind, Tampa ends up being his floor. I think with whatever the Quan Alexander, whatever his name was, that left, I think that Tampa's going to, if he's there for them, I just don't know that they're going to take him. Who do you think? I mean, that's just my gut feeling, but, I mean, do you think they have bigger needs?
Yeah, I think what comes down to it is I think Arizona really has the chance to set the tone of this. If they end up going Kyler Murray, you're going to start seeing some of those edge prospects start falling, and other teams are going to start haphazardly selecting quarterbacks. I think Dwayne Haskins then goes early, and I think Drew Lock or even Daniel Jones goes earlier than expected. I think the Buccaneers are in a position then where they could use a middle linebacker like Devon White, but they also need some edge rusher help. They could use some infusion of new talent in their secondary, but I don't really think anybody's worth it at that point. They could use some offensive line help. I mean, they have other needs, but I think you have a guy like Devon White, if Nick Bosa falls or Brian Burns falls or anything like that, they could look at them. Devon White just seems to make the most sense at that point. I think a cornerback would be a good fit as well, but not at number 5. I think they can find somebody at the top of the second round. But I agree with you that I think Tampa Bay makes the most sense for a first landing spot for White.
Yeah, I mean, I think Tampa is also a prime candidate to, if this becomes a quarterback rush draft, so to speak, where everybody, Murray goes first and everybody starts to panic. I think they're in a prime position to move backwards and see what they get, depending on who's there. As you said, if a Bosa falls, if a Josh Allen falls to them. Even what is it? I can't say his first name. Williams, the D tackle.
Quinn Williams.
If he's there, maybe that's the kind of guy you can't trade away from. But at the same time, you never know. So I think if we look at it like that, that means that somehow the Steelers have to pull a deal with Oakland to get to 4 if they want Devon White. And the number 4 pick. Based on what's this? We're using a draft chart by Draft Tech just to give them credit for this, but you can find it on the web. And the value of the number 4 pick is essentially 1,800 points. Now the Steelers are at 20. The value of the 20 pick is 850 points. That's a huge discrepancy in points. You're talking about 950 point difference. And if you totaled up their second, their 2/3, their fourth. You're talking then about what? Let's see, 380, 260. That's what, 640, 748 something. About 9 something points. 900 something points. But it's probably not even enough even then. So now you add in the 4th, maybe you're over 950 points. Essentially, in order to move from where they are at 20 to try and get as high as 4, they have to either do one of 2 things: give up pretty much the entire draft, or give up the future, because they could probably do it for this and another first-round pick and maybe a 3rd. So if they gave up next year's first-round pick and a 3rd, maybe they can get there. Is it? I mean, do you think that is inaccurate? Do you think there's a way they can get there without sacrificing everything, or is that pretty much what they'd have to do?
To go from 20 to number 4. Or even top 5 period, you have to give up the house. You're either dealing with a large chunk of this year's draft class, or you're pretty much mortgaging your future to give up a huge amount of 2020 draft capital in what right now is looking to be a very strong draft class. And as much as a guy like Devon White could really be the difference in that defense, the Steelers need infusion of talent on the defensive side of the ball, and I don't believe that it would be worth going up that far. I like Devon White. I mean, don't get me wrong, but not at the risk of missing out on potential other prospects that could help your team. For a guy that, I think has a tremendously high ceiling in Devon White, but also, could end up faltering out if it comes down to it. I mean, you have to be 1,050% sure that this guy is going to be the guy, and I think Devon White is that player. I wouldn't want to give up that much for a player of any magnitude unless you're going and looking at a potential franchise quarterback and you're sure he's the savior of your franchise, which the Steelers right now are not looking for. I think that's about the only scenario where I would conceive trading up that far in a draft class. Otherwise, I don't think it's a smart move.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%. We both have talked about this almost since the beginning of draft season, that 2020 shapes up or appears to shape up as a better draft class than this year. We talked heavily about hoping to leverage Antonio Brown into future picks rather than picks this year, simply because of that. It didn't work out that way, but I sure as shooting am not going to sacrifice next year's draft to try and move up in this year's draft. If I can't do it with what I've got at a value that's going to make sense, then it simply isn't worth it. And there's too much mid-round value to be found in this draft for me to really want to scrap the whole thing. So I'm with you there. I think and I'll be candid. If I'm moving up to 4, I'm not moving up to 4 for an inside linebacker. I'm with you there. I wouldn't be doing it. I might do it if Bosa fell past 1, 2, and 3, and I could get 4. Maybe if Josh Allen is there, maybe, but probably not even then. It's just too much capital to give up for a player that isn't necessarily the same impact as a franchise quarterback. That's the kind of move you see for those kind of players. So for people thinking we might move up to try and get Devon White, not at 4. Now, if something crazy happens and Murray goes top and then somebody decides to jump up because they think that the quarterback they want is going to be gone because they've heard that John Gruden is in love with I've heard Locke, I've heard other things, and they decide, well, I got to go up because that's my guy, and if I want him, I got to go up and get him, and now things start to move and everybody starts to fall. Well, if White falls down in 9-10 range, it's still a lot to give up. But now I'm talking maybe a second next year and a third this year and a first, and I might be willing to do that to get Devon White. Now, the flip side of that is, since we talked about Bush, and Bush is all over the place. In mock drafts that I've done, Bush is oftentimes gone, but just as often is sitting there at 20. It's not going to surprise me either way. It really, in some ways, and you can correct me on this if you think I'm wrong, in some ways it depends on Cincinnati's ability to screw up their first-round draft pick yet again and do something that is absolutely antithetical to their needs. I'm just going to do the complete opposite of what I actually should do. And that's their motto. We need offensive linemen. Let's draft wide receivers who have injury histories. I just don't know. But
yeah, I agree.
If he gets past Cincinnati, if White goes early on, let's say 5 to Tampa Bay, and Cincinnati doesn't take Bush, in between Cincinnati and us, I've seen him go to Tennessee in mocks. I've seen him go to maybe, I don't know. I don't remember. For some reason, I think I've seen him go to the Giants, since that's their second pick in the draft. But I'm not positive of that. What's the biggest risk for the Steelers if he gets past Cincy?
I mean, just eyeballing the needs. I think Green Bay is in line for looking for more offensive firepower. They could use help on that defense, but I just feel like they're constantly trying to put pieces there. And after they signed Zach Preston and Zadarius Smith, no, I messed that up. Darius Smith, and I forget who the other one was they signed. I'm drawing a blank, and whatever. Beside the point, they could use some offensive firepower on that side of the ball. I think Miami might be in the market for whatever. As far as I'm concerned, they're in tank mode this year, trying to go for Tua in 2020.
Yeah.
Or any quarterback at that point. I think Washington's going to be in the market for a quarterback if they miss out on the Josh Rosen sweepstakes, if that's actually still going to end up being a thing. Carolina, I think, is probably the biggest risk, but they also need help elsewhere. They still need some offensive line help. They could use some defensive playmakers in the secondary along the D-line. So they have needs elsewhere as well, but they also need somebody to replace Thomas Davis. So they could end up going for a linebacker there. So I would say Carolina or New York Giants are probably the biggest risk of Devon Bush being selected before that pick 20. I don't think the Titans are going to be looking for a middle linebacker after taking Rashaan Evans last year. So if I had to assume, really, if he falls past Cincinnati, unless a team goes flying up for him, you have to be most worried about Carolina and the Giants. But even then, I'm not sure. And the reason I some credit because I'm going to, see what Zach Taylor does. I think he can have a chance to make his imprint and put behind all of these first-round gaffes they've had in recent years where they go completely against the grain and just go for what's considered to be their best player available in the form of a 5'8", 5'9" injury-riddled receiver. You never know. It could end up being that way, but I think realistically, if you're a Steelers fan and you want Devin Bush and he falls past Cincy miraculously, the team to look out for, in my opinion, are Carolina and the Giants.
Yeah, and if that's the case, then you got to look at teams like Washington. As you said, Washington might be in line to try and get a quarterback, so they're probably not a team that wants to move backwards. Atlanta, I don't know. They might move, they might not, and maybe Miami. Now, again, if you're at 13 or 14, you're talking about 250 or 300 points. That could be, again. We say that knowing it's not going to be 250 or 300 points. And we had been talking offline about some examples of how people make you overpay when you're trying to move up in the draft. It's not going to be just an equitable tra-la-la. Oh, that's right. It's 350 extra points. You have gone 1 point over. We will happily credit that back to you or something like whatever. For example, just to move, this is top 10 we're talking about, but when the Bears moved up a spot from where they were 3-2 to get Trubisky, and again, this is a quarterback. The difference in that is 400 points, but basically. But they ended up giving up pick 67. 67 is essentially valued at 255 points. The 111th pick is 72 points. So you're close to the total value there, but then they had to give up a future third. And so you're talking about probably overpaying by a couple hundred points in value. So I don't think that they can say, oh yeah, we will just give up our 20th and say picks 83 and a 6th rounder and we'll be good. It still may take more than that even to move up that little bit. Right?
I would agree. Yeah. It's not a cut and dry science, and I think that's something fans need to realize.
Yeah, it's not as simple, and of course every team is going to look for what they think is the best benefit. And I think it's fair to say that the Steelers are a conservative group. And they're not going to dramatically overpay to move somewhere. So if that's in fact the case, and the value that we're looking at is Bush falls somewhere in between. He's still going to be on the board when Carolina picks. Let's just say that. And we need to move up somewhere between 12 and 15 to get him. Is it worth going for him at that point?
I hate these questions. Yes, I think it is because the Steelers need an impact player on that defense. I don't even think it's necessarily trying to replace Ryan Shazier because, quite frankly,
can't be done.
That's an excuse I'm tired of listening to because you can't replace players like Ryan Shazier. You can't replace players like Troy Polamalu. You're not going to be able to replace a player like Ben Roethlisberger. You find guys to just fill a new role and go and mold the defense around what you have. So the notion that they need to replace Ryan Shazier with an equally hyper-athletic linebacker who also can go from sideline to sideline before you can blink and things. Yes, it'd be nice to have a Ryan Shazier clone, and I think Devon White and Devin Bush both present you that athletic type of prototype that allows you to give some flexibility and coverage that the Steelers currently don't have on the roster. But I think the biggest point, they need a playmaker, and I think Devin Bush gives them that playmaking ability. And I do think, even though this is a nice linebacker class, Devin Bush and Devon White, as far as I'm concerned, are really the only two linebackers in this class that I would trust day one to throw into a defense. And I think that alone, if they're serious and about getting a guy to either give Mark Barron competition or at least allow Mark Barron to flow more naturally and as a dime backer who stays on the field, 50 to 75% of the time, while Devin Bush is a free-flowing coverage linebacker, I think he's worth moving up that much because I have no problem with 10 picks. You're not going to get all those guys on the roster. And the odds of, your fifth rounder or your fourth rounder making a massive impact in year one that Devin Bush can make is next to nothing. So moving up a couple spots with not too bad value, or even packaging in a future mid-round pick or something like that to kind of give you some extra little juice for it, I think would be warranted.
Yeah, if you could give, for example, and while we don't know the answers to this yet, we assume that next year the Steelers are going to get a third-round pick as a compensatory. Damn it, words are hard. A compensatory pick for Bell leaving. If they do get a third-round compensatory pick, that would you say give up 83 this year and that pick to move up? Along with our first, obviously.
I think it'd be something to consider. I think the fact that you would then be working, you have reasonably right now, you have 4 third-round picks in the next 2 years. That's very good draft value to move up. I would feel more comfortable maybe trying to package in that one pick in the mid-round pick next year, like the 4th-round pick, if that would be able to push you over the top to move up those couple points, but. Conceivably, if you give up the 83rd pick this year and your 3rd-round pick next year, assuming the Steelers make the playoffs this upcoming year and they're going to have a pick that's not as low as 20, you're looking at mid-20s to hopefully the 32nd pick in the round if everything goes the way fans want it to.
Absolutely.
The drop-off in picks is a couple of picks when it's all said and done. Yeah, you missed out on an extra prospect, but you're not really hurting yourself with draft capital. You're moving back a couple spots essentially. So to get a guy who I think could be an impact player, so I think that'd be fine in my opinion. I think that's why letting Le'Veon Bell walk and getting right now what's going to probably end up being that 3rd-round compensatory pick makes sense to kind of use that as a bargaining chip in trade discussions with teams this year.
Yeah, and people need to realize that pick, is a nice pick, but you're still talking it's going to be somewhere after pick 96. So you're not, that's why I'm looking at it as saying, okay, if I can give up the comp pick, since we're allowed to trade those now, maybe that swings the deal and is good enough. Because I really don't want to give up 66. It's too close to a 2nd-round pick for me. There's value there. And in fact, I want to kind of switch gears and say, let's just say they can't pull it. They can't pull this deal because they tried last year. I honestly, Colbert said they tried. They sought out trade partners. They wanted to try and move up to get a linebacker. They did what they could. They simply could not find a deal that worked. And there's certainly every chance that happens again and that they end up picking at 20. What I look at in here is, wouldn't it be interesting if they could take that late or that early 3rd-round pick and maybe move that up and get a 2nd-round pick? So now you got a 1st and 2 seconds where I think there's a lot of value in the draft, and there are players who are going to be impactful players that are going to be available to them. I still am completely in the boat that you got 10 is too many picks. And on this team, there simply is not enough room to try and package all that player capital in a team this year. And if you can do something with, even your early 6th round pick and something else to maybe move that 66 pick up into the 2nd round, could be interesting. So while I think I don't know. I don't know how I feel about moving up in the 1st. It's all about what do you got to give up. If the price is right, I'm with you with what you just said. If the price is right and you can do it for what is a comfortable deal, doesn't mean it has to be completely fair, but it has to be comfortable where you're not really overpaying to move up to where you'd have to get one of the Devins. I think, you still need to do something because you simply have too much capital in this draft to try and make them all fit. So, that kind of we've kind of looked at what they can do, but this at least in the 1st round, what do you think about that idea about trying to convert what they actually did get for Antonio Brown, which is the 66th pick from Oakland, and move that up someplace? What do you think they could do to try and move that pick somewhere into the 2nd round, and what would it help them target?
Yeah, I think this draft is going to see some players fall that we probably didn't expect, just like every year does. But I think because there's so much talent in that neutral zone between the end of the 1st round and probably the middle of the 3rd round, there's a lot of guys that are going to fall unexpectedly from where draft Twitter, who knows everything, is going to, where they're going to predict. So I think really if a player were to fall unexpectedly, convinced to move up. I mean, we've seen them do it in recent memory. They just did it last year when it came to trading up to jump the Bengals to grab Mason Rudolph. That the Steelers had the capital. I agree that I don't believe they're going to keep all 10 picks. I think that's just a lot. If this was a team that was 100% in rebuild mode right now, that needed every player possibly could, I wouldn't be surprised if they even traded back a little bit to acquire more picks. But 10 picks is a lot of picks for any team to make, but especially a team like the Steelers who, while they need to add some impact players, really doesn't have a wide open roster for that many players to come in and make an impact. And there's always the chance that you draft a guy who surprises and ends up beating out a current veteran on the roster, but you don't go out of your way to make that happen either. So I think really in that 2nd round, there's going to be linebacker value, or in the 2nd and 3rd round, there's going to be linebacker value. I think there's going to be cornerback value. There's going to be safety value. There's probably going to be some wide receiver and tight end value. If the Steelers were to miss out and just end up standing put at 20, I think they reasonably could move up, either, move up from 66 back into the 2nd round, or maybe even trade their 52nd pick and say like the 66th pick and mortgage those together to go and get up to the top of the 2nd if someone unexpectedly falls. I think that would be at this point a much more expected move. I think the Steelers will move up. I think the way Kevin Colbert's loosely talked about that, I believe he chooses his words wisely, but I also believe whenever he says that they're willing to move up or down in the draft, I really do believe that they're going to move up at some point for a player that they really like that they didn't expect to be there. And I think this year, because of that draft capital, 6th round picks, having 3 of them is really a good thing. That gives you a lot of flexibility to throw these in there to sweeten the deal. Because teams overvalue draft picks substantially compared to prospects that are there. And really, after the 3rd round, 4th round, it's nice to have picks, but really it's not going to help you because you're just taking a crapshoot on a developmental guy more than likely.
Absolutely.
So I'd be fine with moving up. And I think that would be the more realistic idea, is to move up in the 2nd or 3rd round, using the 3rd and 5th or a 3rd and a 6th or whatever to kind of flip-flop spots with a team that might not like the value that's there, or does want to reach on a guy that they think will still be there a couple picks later.
And there's even the potentiality they could do multiple moves here. For example, if they see somebody hit at the end of the 1st round and they look and they say, all right, there's a guy we want that we don't think is going to last to us at 52, you could, in theory, the value for the 83rd pick and the 52 pick gets them up into the top of the second round, in theory, especially if you throw in one of the 6-rounders. So even if you keep 66, right, and you give up 83 and 52, that value is 500 and something points, 55 points. That gets you high up in the second round. So that's a move they could make, which could even still allow them to move back into the second round if they keep 66. I think it's very realistic, as you just said, to expect the Steelers to make a move. The question is where, and I know fans are going to really, really want. We know Eric Herman, our boy himself, who's been doing, by the way, just to give him a shout out, he's been doing some great work, getting some interviews with guys, draft prospects. So if you haven't, check him out on the website because he's been doing some good stuff. And I don't give Eric credit because I mostly give him crap. So I'll be nice to him. But he really wants them to it's Devin or bust for Eric. He wants them to move up to get a Devin. And I'm just not as sold on that, like we've been talking about. But I absolutely think that they're going to make a move. And if it's, while fans may want it to be in the first round, they want something splashy, they want to get all excited about it, and I get it. I really think that there's a good chance that move comes in the second round, and maybe even in the third round. I just don't see them standing pat. I'm with you on that. It's too much. At that point, you're throwing away the late 6th-round picks and the 7th-round pick because those guys aren't going to, they're just not going to be guys you're going to be able to keep unless you've blown it, in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th rounds. Yeah. And whoever you picked is just a disaster. We've seen where they might make a move, and we've sort of talked about if they should make a move. And I think it's pretty clear that we both agree 10 picks is too many picks to hold on to. But the other option, of course, is they could just trade a pick away for next year's picks. They could just say, you know what, we're not going to take a pick here. Maybe that's something that happens with 66. Somebody falls that far, another team wants them. Maybe they trade them for future picks in 2020. Would I hate that? No. Would it excite fans? Probably not. In fact, they might lose their mind. But
until 2020 rolls around, and then they'll be elated when they have an extra 2nd-round pick sitting there.
If you're sitting there with now you've got 3 3rd-round picks because you traded away 66 to a team for a future 3rd and something else, and you've now got your 3rd, that 3rd, and the comp pick for Le'Veon Bell in the 3rd. Now you really are talking about having a lot of capital to move around and play with. It's a lot different. I don't know. So while I think we both, like I said, I think we both agree they probably will make a move. They actually, to segue into this, they actually have made a couple of moves very recently. They just signed a couple of guys from the now apparently defunct AAF. And I know that they had been looking at the hard-hitting safety guy. They passed on him, and you and I were talking about that, and you said there's some injury issues that they didn't go for him. But they did pick up a couple guys. What do you think of the guys they did pick up?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan. As big a fan as you can be going after former AAF guys. I think Hassenauer, I think he's a kind of underrated pick. He's not flashy. I don't think he's going to turn into the next, BJ Finney, the next whomever, undrafted free agent lineman turned starter. But I think he at least gives you an extra body and, potentially prevents you from having to reach on an interior offensive lineman, which I think is a need and a potential need depending on how the draft board falls. And I think an offensive line is a pick that the Steelers are going to consider, especially on the interior, that a lot of fans aren't going to be happy with. But I think it's imperative just due to the fact that, Ramon Foster and BJ Finney are not guaranteed to be around past next season or 2020. I mean, BJ Finney this year, and then you're left with no options. And I always will be a fan of letting guys develop before throwing them out into action, even if they are ready, because I think you get the best results that way. And I think there's no better interior lineman to learn from than Ramon Foster, Marquise Pouncey, and David DeCastro. So I think Hassenauer, I think, would be a nice guy there to kind of develop, see what you got with him. He's not over the top flashy, but he has the Alabama pedigree. So you never know. Those offensive linemen are always gritty and big, and so we'll see. But Jack Tocho, I'm sorry, don't know how to pronounce the name. It looks like Tocho, it might not be.
That's what I was going with.
Yeah, everything I've gathered about him, didn't know a whole lot about him, but he tested well at the combine in 2017. I mean, he was a late round pick. Was a corner, switched to safety, or considering move to safety just due to some athletic restrictions that you don't really want to have from your guy sitting out on the outside. But he was productive in college, and he's an extra body there to see what you have. I would have preferred Tyson Graham, the safety that rumors were circulating that were going to come out with him, because I think he's a much more stereotypical dime backer, strong safety type that I think the Steelers were considering or are considering. Especially with Morgan Burnett being on the way out now. But, I think they're two solid picks. I mean, it's hard to tell what any of these guys are going to do in the NFL. They were out of the NFL for a reason. The AAF is definitely was a nice showcase league to get these guys looks. But at the end of the day, they could end up being surprising options. And because it's an offensive lineman, which the Steelers have done such a good job of developing in recent years. I mean, clearly they saw something they liked, and per Pro Football Focus, he was the second rated center this year in the limited games we saw. And by all means, Tocho or Toto, whatever, he seemed like he did halfway decent for himself as well with the iron. I'm not surprised they went after two Birmingham Iron players. So, we'll see their bodies. I'm not going to hold my breath that either one of them makes an impact, but if they do, I mean, that's great. And as far as I'm concerned, that means the AAF did its job, even though it was a very limited fashion.
Done and one and done. Yeah, I mean, do you think that this makes any difference for what they end up doing in the draft?
Absolutely not.
Yeah, I can't see it. They just, I wasn't going to try and do Hassenauer's name until you said it. So I would have felt comfortable with Tocho, though, and I could be completely wrong.
Both are probably wrong. I'm just going off of phonetics right now.
Yeah. So I like Hassenauer because I think he has that position flexibility like B.J. Finney. He can do center. He can probably play some guard. And like you said, he has a pedigree, and I'm never going to complain about them picking up an offensive lineman. And I don't know jack about Jack. So I'm not even going to try. I haven't done my homework on him. I just know, they wanted a safety. They essentially got a safety. They lost the safety because Morgan Burnett was released. So that makes sense. Joe and I talked recently about Morgan Burnett and about, the I guess the kind of drama surrounding his limited stay with the Steelers and then his desire to leave. Do you have a take on that? Joe kind of was of the opinion, he was like, you signed a contract, just, play your contract, and don't complain when you weren't there. You weren't available to play anyway most of the time. Whereas I see it as, things change. You thought you were coming in to do one job, and by the time you could get on the field for whatever reason, you were asked to do another job, and you didn't like that job. It's all, you're so fine. Okay, go someplace else. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I think the way Morgan Burnett handled it, he went to the team with a complaint, asked for his release, and he signed a contract. But and to an extent, it is his own fault for whether it was intentional or not intentional. The injury bug snapping, because he was the starter above Terrell Edmonds. Terrell Edmonds was supposed to be that dime backer guy. Extra safety coming into those 7 DB sets, and Morgan Burnett was unavailable, and the best ability is availability, and Terrell Edmonds played the second most snaps of any Steeler this year behind only Steelers defender behind only Sean Davis. So I mean, he did his part I just think this really shows you that as much grief as we give these players that play for contracts, even when they get paid, a lot of them, I think this showed you that a lot of these guys do still play the game because they want to play the game. And when you sign with the team under the impression you're going to be the starting strong safety, and then you end up getting beat out by a rookie, I don't blame him for wanting to go someplace else where he can get some playing time. And I think his situation with the Browns now, where they traded away Jabril Peppers and they really don't have anybody else on that back end, even if they draft somebody, I don't envision him losing that job, especially with the money they're paying him, unless they get a situation where a Terrell Edmonds type player steps up and takes his job. I think this went about as smoothly and about as cleanly as you possibly could have asked for. They tried to trade him. They couldn't. They accommodated his wishes. He moved on in the sunset, got a new contract, and that was it. So I understand, the notion where you want him to finish out the contract that you agreed to sign. But at the end of the day, if you don't like your job and you're not happy with it, go find another job and, cut the cord. No harm, no foul, no personal feelings. He understands it's the business, and the Steelers have to put the best, team, best 11 guys on the field. And that was with Terrell Edmonds and not him. And he also wasn't available. So, it was in both of their best interest to walk away. And I think it went about as smoothly and as good as it possibly could have. And I think that because of the entire situation transpiring the way it did, the Steelers can move forward with their draft plans. He has a new home and can look forward to OTAs. I think it worked out for both parties involved, and the Steelers eat very little, if any, dead money really that's going to impact their plans moving forward. So
yeah, I agree. The only other thing I think that I want to talk about tonight has actually nothing to do with the draft. It has nothing to do with anything that we've talked about. It is our upcoming March of Dimes contest. So I don't know if you're aware, but for the last couple years, we have been giving away full-size autographed Steelers helmets. Last year, we gave away Rocky Blyer, and the first year, I don't remember, might have been Jack Ham. I can't remember who we gave. Oh, it was a Le'Veon Bell helmet. Oh, well, I'm sorry to whoever won that. I can't remember now. But yeah, we gave away a Le'Veon Bell helmet. And this one's safe. This is safe. Look, you're not going to be disappointed. For the guy who won the Le'Veon Bell helmet, donate again this year, and you've got a chance to win a helmet from the real 26, not the fake 26, the real 26, Rod Woodson. So, talking about a point when the Steelers got lucky in the draft because Rod Woodson was never expected to fall to them, and it required other teams to screw up in order to have that happen. And we can only hope that happens again this year. But every year around this time, we do this kind of giveaway. And I don't want to call it a contest because it's not really a contest. What we're asking you to do is to donate to the March of Dimes. This is their annual walk. You walk for healthy moms and healthy babies, essentially. You don't give us anything. You go to a website, you put in whatever you want to put in, you make a donation, you put in the comments on your donation, Steel City Underground or SCU, whatever you're happier typing, and if you're slower, you don't want to type long, type in SCU. And make your donation, and when you do, that will enter you into the drawing for a full-sized autographed Rod Woodson helmet that's certified by Leaf, so it's a good thing. So essentially, here is where you're going to go. You're going to go to www.marchforbabies.org/Brian Roach. And that's me. So that'll take you to my page. You go on that page, you make a donation. When you're done making the donation, we will give you a shout out on the podcast. We will look at it. And when the March happens, which is May 5th, we will do a drawing. We've done it live on Periscope, on Twitter, which is probably what we'll do again this year. And whoever's name gets essentially pulled out of the randomizer gets a full-size Rod Woodson helmet. I tweeted it out earlier today. We will be continuing to tweet it out. There's a page that will go up on the Steel City Underground website that you can go to for details. But it's a good cause. And, like I said, if you've ever wanted to own a nice piece of Steelers memorabilia and you either thought you couldn't afford it or, you just, for whatever reason, didn't have it available to you, now you got a chance. Make a donation, $5 and up. I think you have to give $5. I don't think the March of Dimes is willing to let you donate less than that. But you donate $5 and up. $5 gets you 5 entries. $20 gets you 20 entries. Whatever you do, and that drawing or that this contest, so to speak, or this promotion will be running until May 5th. So you'll have up until the day of the walk to make your donation. May 5th, you make the donation. You get pulled out of the randomizer. You've won a Rod Woodson full-size helmet. So we had great support in years past. Right now, the first guy who does it is the only guy in the bin because we don't have anybody in the bin yet. We've been a little slow on the uptake to start promoting this. So we'll probably do a video podcast so you get a chance to see the helmet coming up. But give it a shot. We'll put the March of Dimes address in the comments under the podcast. If you want to make a donation, got a shot at winning the helmet. So, you know, we appreciate it. It's a good thing. And if you want to find out why I care or why we care, there is a web page on the site called Emily's Story. You go read about it. It's my daughter, and you'll find out why this makes a difference to us. So that's, I think, everything we had to talk about, unless you got something else to talk about, Zach.
I actually, after I was done, it bothered me so much what the pronunciation of his name was. I went and I looked, and I found a little excerpt from his very brief time with the Vikings in 2017. With your last name being Tocho, do people have any fun nicknames for you? And he replied, I don't have any nicknames, but people butcher my name a lot. Different variations, Taco, Tacho, and Toko. It's just Ocho with Tocho. So there we go. The mystery is solved.
Excellent. Well, yes. Now that we've put that to bed, we can put this edition of the podcast to bed. Zach, thank you for taking the time. It's always a pleasure to have you on board.
Yes, sir. I appreciate it.
All right, and for everybody else, we'll have more stuff coming up. The draft is getting closer and closer. We will probably be doing another mock, maybe our last one, maybe not. We might squeeze 2 more in before the draft rolls around. And who knows, Joe and I may talk about drafts past again or other things. You got any suggestions, put them in the comments. We love to hear back from you guys. Thanks for the support. If you're not a subscriber, hit the subscribe button. If you are, turn the bell on so you get notifications. And for everybody that was fooled by the Heath Miller is going to come back April Fool's show again, we're sorry. He wasn't coming back, and we didn't mean it. We promise. All right. So that's going to wrap it up for this edition of the podcast. Again, my name's Brian. His name's Zach. And as we always like to end with, it's chaos out there, so be kind.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.